Today there's 2 mandatory dives and 3 optional dives. So 2 mandatory dives would mean 2 dives that have to be done. And there's, I think they're saying that there's going to be 3 rounds today. 3 rounds of diving. So. Just announcing the divers now. So schools from all over the area contribute divers today. Each diver will do 1 dive, and then they cut after about 6 dives, and I think they cut after 8 dives, and there's 11 dives overall. So there'll be mandatory dives each round. There'll be optional dives, and the person with the best score after each round, the top, will move on. I think they cut something like 6 and then 3 and then 2 or something like that. So. First diver is Pat McPeed of Upper Moreland. His first dive is supposed to be a double, but there's some discrepancy over the dive. So they'll be switching up that dive. So it will not be a double front. It will be sort of a mystery right now, but something else. So he's doing a forward full twisting dive layout position. That's the true dive that he's doing. A little over rotation on that. They're going to take off for it, but it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be too much. We have 3 1/2, 4 1/2, 5, 5 1/2, and a 3 1/2. PW's first diver is up. And he'll be doing an inward dive in the pike position. Very well done. Pretty close to the point, didn't jump out, and he'll get very high scores on that. 7 1/2, 7, 6, 6 1/2, 6. So pretty good start for PW. Inward dive pike coming now, and Norristown's own Danny Stauffenberg is on deck. Pretty straight, toes pointed there. Everything he needed to do, he did. Not high enough jump on it. So we have 6 1/2, 5, 5 1/2, 5 1/2, 5 1/2. So not the best of scores, but right where he wants to be. Certainly not out of the running. So here's Danny Stauffenberg, and he's doing a half twist for his forced dive. Came in a little sloppy. He'll get 4s on that. It shouldn't be too bad. He's getting 5s, so that's already good. We have 5, 6, 5, 5 1/2, 5. So judging pretty consistent today, which is always good to see. Here's Plymouth Whitemarsh's second diver. He'll be doing a back dive pike. Came in a little flat, didn't bring his legs up to be straight. He's going to get 5s on it. A little high, 4 seems more about right. So we have 5, 4 1/2, 5, 4, 5. So, I mean, again, those tops and bottom scores will be thrown out. So he's averaging about a 5 right now, which is good. But the way he did his dive, he should have been up by 6s. So he's probably not too happy with it. Okay, inward dive. Didn't point his toes. Didn't have his legs together. He's going to get pretty lower on scores on that. So we have 5, 5, 4, 4 1/2, 5. So it seems like the judges across the pool have a much better look at the judges that are right in front of the pool. So next we have an inward somersault in the tuck position. Pretty good height, pretty good rotation. Went in straight, not quite pointed toes, but I mean, it's not that bad. So we have 5 1/2, 6 1/2, 5, 5 1/2, 6 1/2. So it shouldn't be that bad. I mean, he's going about average. So we have a back dive straight right now. He's not going to get much of the degree of difficulty as he would if he did or a pike or layout, but you know where he's doing a layout. Layout and straight are the same thing. Folded a little bit on his entry. His legs were on pointer. He's going to get 4s and 3s on that. So we have 4 1/2, 4, and then 4s across the board. So certainly lower than everybody else so far, but shouldn't be too bad. So we have an inward dive pike coming right now from Upper Moreland. Very well done. His feet came apart a little bit on his entry, but it shouldn't be too much of a deduction. He'll get high on that. So we have 7, 7, 6, 6, and 6 1/2. So very, very good height off of that. His legs broke a little bit on his entry, or he would have gotten 7s all across the board and maybe an 8. So we have a reverse dive straight position coming right now. Good height off his dive. His legs were a little bit apart during the entry. 6 seems like far too high of a score. So we have 5 1/2, 5 1/2, 4, 6, 5. So 6, that'll be thrown out. So that's good because that's too high. And one of the 4 1/2, I think, will get thrown out. So he's doing a 1 1/2 somersault in the pike position. Pretty well done. A little far out. He might want to jump a little higher. He'll get average scores on that. So we have 5 1/2, 5 1/2, 5 1/2, 5, 5. So it's not too bad. Then we have Chris Norman from Upper Dublin. He's doing a 1 1/2 somersault in the pike position, and we have Luke Stem of Norristown on deck. Very tightly piked. That'll get him extra points. Went in a little floppy. Should have gone a little straighter. So we have 6, 5 1/2, 5 1/2, 5 1/2, 5 1/2. So pretty good score for him so far. Pretty consistent. So Luke will also be doing a forward 1 1/2 somersault in the pike position. Came in a little bit unstraight, nicked the water a little bit, so he's going to get 5s on that. And he got a 6, so we have 5, 5, 5, 5, and 6. So he's got all 5s so far. The 6 will be thrown out. Luke is sporting an ankle bracelet, ankle brace actually, not the jewelry. He hurt his leg recently, and he's unable to practice as much as he would have liked. Very well done. Forward 1.5 pike grab. Judges usually like to see the grab on the pike. So we have 6 1/2, 6, 6, 5, 6. So one of the top runners so far. Here's PW's next diver. He's doing an inward dive pike. Let's see how he does. A little bit floppy, didn't jump up too high. He'll get 5s off that. So we have 4, 4 1/2, 5, 5 1/2, 5 1/2. So okay scores, not particularly where he wanted to be, but I'm sure that none of these divers yet are out of the running. Here we have a reverse dive. So reverse somersault. Came in a little bit at an angle and splashed a little bit, but he's going to get 5s and 6s on that. So we get 6 1/2, 6, 5 1/2, 5, 6. Very, very high jump off his hurdle, which definitely helped him. Discrepancy with the dive. He's doing a 403C inward 1.5 somersault in addition. Degree of difficulty 2.2. Kind of close to the board. He made a big splash on his entry because he didn't fully come out of his pike or out of his tuck. So we got 4, 4 1/2, 4, 4 1/2, 5 1/2, 4 1/2. So not too bad for a 2.2 degree of difficulty. 3 scores are multiplied by the degree of difficulty in order to get your final score. So for 11 dives, you would be upward somewhere in the range of maybe 435 is the record for Norristown pool. Set. Half twist for Plymouth Whitemarsh. Little sloppy, needs to tighten it up if he wants to do any better. I think it's 3 1/2, 3 1/2, 4, 4 1/2, 5. Actually, Norristown's pool record was set by Luke's brother of Norristown, Matt Stem, who's now moved on, gone into college and past that now. So Luke's following in his footsteps. So Danny with a pretty good 1.5 pike. Splashed a little bit on the entry, didn't rotate that fast, but he's going to get 4 1/2, 5 1/2, 5, 6, 5. So pretty good scores for him. So now we have a back and 1/2 somersaults. Half. Pretty close to the board. Not too close, so they won't deduct, but didn't rotate enough, quick enough. He kind of went in with his hands down a little bit. So we have a 4, 5 1/2, 4, 6, and 5. Now we have a forward 1.5 somersault pike. Pretty good height, pretty good entry. Again, he folded on his entry. He broke his legs. He needs to keep those together if he wants to get higher scores. He's not going to make it throughout the entire competition if he doesn't keep his legs together. He's about 5 right now. With that dive, with his legs together, he might have gotten a 6. And if his toes were pointed, he probably would have gotten 6 1/2. So he really needs to tighten that up. And actually, Norristown's coach is actually telling him what to do now. So that should make them both feel better. I know it's hard for a coach to see a student, an athlete, not perform to their best ability. So Coach Stoff just pulled him aside and told him that he needs to keep his legs together, he needs to point his toes, and he'll get much higher scores. So that was nice of her. So now we have an inward dive in the pike position. Pretty good. I mean, not particularly great, but we have 3.5, 5, 4, 4, 4. So, I mean, he's averaging about a 4, 4.5 right now. So, now we have an 8.5 from Upper Moreland. Excellent. Maybe keep his legs a little tighter, but he's going to get 5s and 6s. 5 seems like too low of a score, but I mean, so we had 6.5, 6, 5, 5.5, 5.5. I'm sorry, 5.5 seems like an okay score. 6 seems like, or 5 seems too low of a score. That was a pretty good dive. So he's right where he wants to be. And with a 2.2 degree of difficulty, he'll definitely like that. Reverse and a half, lots of height on that. So he could potentially even do a reverse double or reverse 2.5. But he got 4, 4, 4.5, 5, 4.5. So, I mean, he folded a little bit on his entry. His hands weren't fully over his head, and his hands weren't pointed, toes weren't pointed, legs weren't together. But things wrong. He didn't get too many deductions off of it, so he's pretty lucky. Pretty good. Oh. No, that's all.
That's a true champion right there.
We're having technical difficulties for the power for the building. Coach is telling them to get out of the water in case there's a power surge. Don't want anybody to get electrocuted. But we are still rolling here. We never quit here, so. Diver's making jokes that. So they're still going to score the dive. So we'll get half, 5. Four and a half, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. So we're pretty much in a dead standstill right now. And we'll come back with you as soon as we find any results. Okay, so we are back, folks. After a short delay because of the power outage, I'll back up with Chris Nolan's second dive, which is a back 1.5 somersaults in the free position. 1.5 somersault, half twist. So, back twisting dive. It's his second dive of the night. So a little awkward going in. It's going to get 4s on it. So we have 4, 4, 4. So 4s across the board. All 4s across the board. So, I mean, here's Luke Stem's second dive. and couldn't quite hear the dive, but I'll tell you what it is soon. So it's an inward dive in the free position. He'll probably get 4s and 5s on that. So we have 5.5, 5, 4 and 1/2, 5, 4 and 1/2. So we have inward dive pike. So a very very well done inward dive. Little flop on his back, but he's in at 5 and 1/2, 5 and 1/2, 5, 5 and 1/2, 5. So not too bad. That dive he wanted to have a little more, but it shouldn't be too bad. So an inward 1.5 somersault tuck. Degree of difficulty 2.2. Very strong tuck. He did actually pretty well on that dive. I'm paying him pretty straight. They're going to give him 5, 5.5, 6, 6. So he did get those 2 6s, which means one of those is going to be averaged into his score. So that's good for him. High jump on that, very strong tuck, so hence the score. And an even better one from him. So we're going to get 5 and 1/2, 6, 5 and 1/2, 6, 6 and 1/2. So that's just because he went in straighter, kept his legs tighter, tucked tighter. So an overall better dive than before. So it was a forward double. Done pretty well. He's going to get about 5s on that. So we have 3 and 1/2, 5 and 1/2, 5, 5 and 1/2, 5 and 1/2. So pretty decent scores for him. And it seems he's got a fan club up in the stands. So good for him. Forward 1.5 pike. Not too much of a top pike on that. Very loose pike. So we're going to get 4, 4, 4 and 1/2, 5, 4. So not the best of scores, but pretty okay for where he wants to be. So now we have Danny Stofferman at a double front flip tuck position. So pretty well done for Danny. A little bit of a splash at the entry. He's going to get 3s and 4s, and it shows you 5s and 4s, so even better. So it's 4, 4, 4 and 1/2, 5, 4 and 1/2. So pretty okay scores for Danny. He might even make the second round. I hope he makes the second round. He's definitely good enough to. That looks like an inward 1.5 somersault. Degree of difficulty 2.2. I was right. Popped out a little too early. Got a little splash on that, so he's not going to get the high scores that he can. So 3 and 1/2, 3 and 1/2, 4 and 1/2, 4, 4. So again, lower scores than everyone else, but still only because he popped out too early. Now this is the one where and he needs to keep his legs straight on his entry. So watch his entry and see if he keeps his legs straight. Kept his legs a little bit straight on that one, just because he went in a little floppy. They're going to score. So we have 4, 4 and 1/2, 4, 4, 4 and 1/2. So okay scores. Didn't open his legs as much on the entry, so. So 5, 5, 5, 6, 5. So pretty decent. Same again. Inward 1.5. He did everything he's supposed to do. Just needs to tighten up his mechanics. So a little floppy coming in. Not his best scores. So we have 4 and 1/2. So 4 and 1/2 across the board. So Yahtzee on that one, all the same score. So a forward double pike position, pretty well done. Broke his pike a little bit, splashed a little bit. So we got 5, 5, 5.5, 5, 4 and 1/2. So pretty good scores. Haven't seen much above a 7 tonight. We haven't seen a 7 tonight, I don't think. Haven't seen much above a 6.5 tonight. So maybe in the later rounds we'll see some higher scores, but on their basic dives they should be getting higher. There's a rotation on his end. Score him lower. 3 and 1/2, 3, 3 and 1/2, 4, 3 and 1/2. So all the doubles are coming out tonight. We have, that one was more piked, but 5, 6, 4 and 1/2, 5, 4 and 1/2. 6 is too high of a score for that dive. It was not a 6 as well performed as a 6 should be. So that scores, I'm glad it's getting thrown out. So very fast rotation on that one. Looks like Norristown's own game with the way he spins. Just very fast, very precise. So we get 4, 4, 4 and 1/2, 4 and 1/2, 5. So Luke Stem's third dive. Oops, seems to be a discrepancy with the scores. They're going to hold the scores up again. And so it's 5, 4 and 1/2, 4 and 1/2, 4 and 1/2, and a 5. So Luke Stem's third dive for Norristown. 52-33 D, back 1 and 1/2 somersaults with 1 and 1/2 twists. Degree of difficulty is a 2.5, so even if he gets scored kind of low on this one, he's still got the degree of difficulty to back him up. So Luke came in a little broken. He's probably going to get 3s and 4s on that, hopefully 4s and 5s. So we have 4, 4 and 1/2, 4, 5, 3 and 1/2, 5, 4 and 1/2, 6. 6 is far too high of a dive score for that one dive. So the last score was a 5 and 1/2. So back 1 and 1/2 somersaults. Degree of difficulty 2.3. smacked a little bit. Lots of cheers coming from the audience, even though he's probably only going to get 4s on it. So 4, 4 and 1/2, 4 and 1/2, 4. So definitely not what he wanted as his scores. So he did a forward 2.5. That was the first 2.5 we see tonight, and it was pretty good. So 3 and 1/2, 5, 4 and 1/2, 5 and 1/2, 4. So score's kind of all over the place, kind of sporadic. He needs to come in a little bit straighter, and he gets 5s on all that. So back dive, needs to keep his legs straighter, needs to keep his legs more tight. So that's our first 7 tonight. So we have an 8 even tonight. 8, 6 and 1/2, 6 and 1/2, 6, 7. Certainly not deserving of an 8. Maybe just all 7s, but 8 is far too high for that. So pretty glad that one's getting thrown out. That might even be a failed dive. And they're going to score it. So, and 4 is way too high for that. So we get 4s across the board, depending on whether to half or not. No offense to that diver. I mean, that was just poorly executed all around. So, I mean, he's going to really have to pick himself up if he needs to get to the next round. And shame on judges. That should have been 2s, 3s at best, 3 at best. Danny Stauffenberg of Norristown's next dive. Inward 1.5. Popped out a little too early. He's going to get 4s on that. So 4 and 1/2, 4, 4 and 1/2, 4, 4. So pretty right where he needs to be. Right where I thought his dive should have been scored. Just shows you where I'm at. 1 and 1/2 somersault in the tuck position. Inward 1 and 1/2 somersault in the tuck position. So he flopped on. He smacked pretty hard. I hope he's okay. Looks like they're going to score it. So 2, 2, 3 and 1/2, 3, 2. So 3.5 is way too high for a dive that was almost failed. Usually, if you're going to fail a dive or you're thinking about it, it should be no higher than a 2, in my opinion. Now, what that diver did, he took a slight hop off the board and then went back onto the board and jumped. Sometimes if the judges see that, they will actually not even score the dive. That's considered a disqualification and a failed dive. So just because he jumped off the board like that. So, I mean, pretty average scores for that dive. But, again, you cannot leave the board. Your feet must always remain on the board when you jump. Back and a half. A little bit of a kick out there. Made the splash. Not too bad. 3 and 1/2, 4, 3 and 1/2, 4, 4. So, and we see coaches on the sideline now still coaching their players before they get up onto the board. Not too late for a last little bit of judging or coaching. Was our first double, I believe. So 5, 4 and 1/2, 4 and 1/2, 5, 4 and 1/2. So we have a back dive in the straight position. Five and a half, 4 and 1/2, 5, 5, 5. So not too bad. I'm just repeating myself if I say the same thing over and over again. I mean, that just needs to be tightened up on the mechanic. Inward 1.5 on that one. So 4, 4 and 1/2, 4 and 1/2, 5, 5. Little bit of a rotation, a twist on his inward 1.5 there. But I'll tell you what, that little guy could spin. He can spin fast. So here's Luke Stem's 4th dive. Doing an inward 1 and 1/2 somersault in the tuck position, I believe. And Luke has since taken off the ankle brace. So maybe it's not bothering him. Maybe it was affecting his ability to control his feet when he was diving. So. Excellent. He'll get 6s and 7s on that. That was just really nice. Only that could help him is he jumped higher. So 6, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5. So. Say forward 2.5. Pretty well done too. Second one of the night. 3.5. 4, 4, 3. So actually the last one was better scored, but I don't know if it was better done or not. Hard dive regardless. It was pretty good. He wasn't on the end of the board, so they're going to take off for that. Didn't rotate too fast, didn't grab too hard. So we have 5.5. As for the rest, so. A little bit of a floppy back dive. I think he had 5s on that. 5 and 1/2, 4 and 1/2, 5, 5. So, could have been done better, and he knows it. Always room for improvement, no matter what. Back and a half, flopped a little bit on his entry. He'll get 4s on that. So 5, 3.5, 3.5, 4.5, 4. So average about a 4 on that. So we have a back somersault in the straight position. Degree of difficulty 1.7. A little bit of a splash on that. He'll probably get 3s or 4s on that. 4s and 5s maybe. 4, 3 and 1/2, 4, 4. Danny's back 1 1/2 somersaults. He's last second. A little bit of a snap on that. I think the judges are wondering whether they should dive score it or not. And it looks like they're going to. Again, 3 1/2 is far too high of a score. 3, 2, 3 1/2, 3, 1 1/2. Back and a half, a little bit of a splash on that. Again, he's probably just going to get 4s and 5s. So about a 4 1/2 average on that one. Watch the legs, see? I mean, beautiful height, beautiful rotation. He just needs to come in with his feet pointed and his legs together. So you get 6, 4 1/2, 4 1/2, 5 1/2, 5. Double front somersault. So 2 front somersaults. 5, 4 1/2, 4 1/2, 5 1/2, 5. So now we have a forward somersault with 1 twist. A little bit of a rotation on that. On his forward rotation for his flip. So he'll splash. 3 1/2, 3, 3 1/2, 3 1/2, 4. So a little bit of an odd rotation on his. He didn't usually grab with a twist. Divers usually will put their hand over their head and grab their elbow, like armpit. So 4 1/2, 4, 3 1/2, 4 1/2, 5 1/2. So usually divers will grab their armpit and the back of their head to spin, and that helps them rotate. But he pretty much rotated in a free position, so pretty well done. So back and a half, also splashed on his, so shouldn't be too bad. 3, 2, 4, 3, 4. So the judges don't know how to judge it, and they're all over the place for that one. So hopefully you get this one okay. So that's a perfect example of not jumping up at all when you push down on the board so hard. Really didn't go anywhere when he jumped off the board. And he's probably going to get about 4 across the board, except for the 4.5 and the 4.5. So he didn't jump at all off the board. He just pushed and then left his feet, didn't jump up at all. He probably could have gotten so much better scores on that had he done that. Strong tuck on that one. Not where you wanted to be, though. 3.5, 3.5, 4, 5, 3.5. So he just needs to come out of that sooner and get straighter. So now Luke is doing his forward double pike. So he broke his pike on his entry just so he wouldn't smack as hard. Judges probably didn't even see it. 5.5, 5, 5, 5.5, 5. So imagine what he had done if he had kept his pike the whole time. So then we have a reverse double somersault. Ooh, and he didn't fully rotate, so they're going to take off big time for that. And he was out in the front, too. I mean, this guy's been hitting all his dives all night. So 2, 2, 2, 3, 2. That's probably the best scoring so far for a judge for a dive that was almost failed. So judges are catching on. So there's a forward double tuck position. 6, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 5. Pretty good considering he wasn't on the end of the board when he jumped in. But that kid gets tremendous height off of his jumps. So little discrepancy in the judges. Stop a couple players, and we move on to the next round. So we'll be back with you momentarily while the judges warm up, divers warm up. Straighter and pone his toes, but I mean, look, keeps his legs a little bit together. So 6, 6, 6, 5, 5.5. Back dive straight. We get 4, 5s and 6s on that. 6.5, 5, 4.5, 6, 4.5. So a 2.5 point difference between their highest and lowest score there. That shouldn't really be a factor, but that's why we throw out the highest and lowest scores in 11 dive meets. They're doing an inward pike. So it's supposed to be a pike. He tucked on it, actually. So. Back dive straight. All I need to do is point. So let's see. A little straighter would have helped him out, but he's going to get 6s on that. So 6, 6, 5.5, 5, 6. Little high for those scores, but I mean, not too bad. It's now Nick of Springfield. Back dive straight. Same dive as before. So Luke actually had a better back dive than Nick did there. So 5, 4.5, 5, 4, 5. There's Max Feeney of Lewis Whitemarsh. He's doing a reverse dive straight. Big splash on his entry, so that should hurt things. Very strong twisting dive from there. He'll get 6s and 7s on that, hopefully. 6, 6.5, 5, 5, 6. And we'll be right back with the continuation of diving. And we're back with Danny Stauffenberg of Norristown. For with a very good reverse dive. A little bit of a rotation on it, but he'll get 6s and 5s on that, so that's pretty good. So 5.5, 5, 5, 6, 5.5. Here we have PW's next diver. A little bit of a splash on that one. Needs to just hold on tight or jump a little bit higher. So 3.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4. Forward half twist. I have a good feeling that he's not going to get anything higher than a 5 if he doesn't keep his legs together and toes pointed. So look for that. And he didn't have it at all. He splashed the judges. Good idea to do. The judges are wet. Your score will be low. And it seems they're wondering if it's going to be a failed dive or not. Didn't look like a failed dive to me. So they're saying unsatisfactory, a maximum of 2. So we have 2, 2, 2, 2, 1.5. So Doug of Springfield. A little bit of rotation on the entry. Again, judges got wet, never a good idea. He on board, not to mention, so they're going to score him low, high, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 5.5. So we have almost a 3-point difference in scores there. So the judges really need to get their act together. That should never happen. So forward dive pike, didn't point his toes in his pike. Just walk. Here we have a back and a half from Upper Moreland. Should be good. Splashed a little bit on his entry, not fully rotated around, but he did do it in the free position, which will get him the degree of difficulty. They're going to score the dive, which is good. So go 4, 3, 3.5, 3.5, 4. So he's not completely dead in the water. No pun intended. Seems we have another discrepancy with the dive. Doing a 402C inward somersault. Pretty good splash though too. So he'll probably get 4s, 5s. 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Averaging about 4.5 right now. So he's doing a back dive in the straight position. Pretty good. Folded a little bit on his entry, so probably get 5s and 6s maybe, depending on the kid. 4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. So no 6s. I was wrong. I can admit that. for a reverse somersault tuck. Degree of difficulty 1.6. So, yeah, balk on the board. A balk is when a diver moves out to the end of the board and doesn't take his dive. So they're going to score him a maximum of 2, no matter what. Extremely close to the board. It was a pretty good dive, but too bad he's not going to get scored too high. So I'm sorry, they're only going to deduct 2 points from their score, is what it is. So we have 1.5. 1, 1, 2, 2. So what would have been 3s and 4s is now 1s and 2s. Here's a Luke Stems dive. It looks like a reverse dive, I believe. Pike. Very well done. Very straight going into the pool, and he'll get 6s on that. 6.5. 5.5. 6, 6, 6. So, not the sign of the devil, but the sign of a good dive. So now Nick from Springfield's doing a reverse dive in the straight position. So pretty good. Folded a little bit too far back on his entry. He'll get 4s and 5s on that. 4, 5, 5, 5, 4. 4.5, sorry. So not too bad of scores, but certainly not securing his first place victory. So very far back on the board after the jump. They'll deduct highly for that. He was not on the end of the board when he jumped. His twisting was a little loose. So we have 4, 4, 4, 4.5, 4. So would have been much higher had he been on the end of the board and had he twisted properly and come into the board water straight. But other than that, inward dive tuck, 1 point. Pretty good, very straight, very well done. 7.5, 6, 6, 6.5, 7. So pretty good, even though he did get, it was a 1.4 or 1.5 degree of difficulty on that, but still. You master one of those dives and you can get 7s on it, why not throw it in an 11 dive meet? Ooh, little like quarter of a twist on that dive, so who's ever cheering doesn't know what they're cheering for because they're only scoring it pretty low. 3.5, 5, 4.5, 3.5, 2.5. So scores all over the place. Judges oblivious to the fact that there's a twisting in the dive, and there wasn't supposed to be. So almost a failed dive that they're giving it 5s and 4.5. So, my opinion, 3 at best. Inward 1.5, pretty well done. Danny Stauffenberg, a 302B reverse. Pretty well done. We get 5.5, 6.5, 4.5, 5, and 6. 5, sorry. So we have some pretty random scores tonight. A little bit all over the place, a little bit here and there. So. Forward dive with a half twist. He didn't jump up in the air, which will hurt him. So back double, didn't pop out of it, so he's going to get scored a little bit lower. 4.5, 3.5, 4, 3, 3.5. So certainly not where he wants to be. He wants to pop out before he gets around to that final spin so that he's on the board doing a water doing a cannonball. So. So reverse dive, or reverse somersault. In the tuck position. 5.5, 5, 4.5, 4, 5.5. So a reverse somersault tuck, 1.6 should be good. Very well done. Forward. Pretty good on 2.5, so pretty high scores for him too. Reverse somersault tuck, 1.6. Big splash on the entry. Didn't jump too high. He's going to get 4s on it, maybe 5s. 3s and 4s then. 4, 4, 4.5, 3.5, 4. Big splash on the entry for such a little guy. So let's see what the scores are. 3, 3, 5, 4, 4.5. So. Here's Luke's demo of Norristown's. There's Luke's back and a half. A little bit of a scoop on that. He'll get 5s on it, though, so that's still really good. Ooh. Not the best back and a half. He'll get low scores on that. 2.5, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 4. So bad luck for him. Very far out on his jump, very large splash. He'll get 3s and 4s. 4, 3.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. So we're going to take a break right now. We're going to recap the scores, and we're going to make the judges will make the cuts. So we'll see you soon. Last round of the meet is underway. We only have 3 dives left to go for each of the 12 divers. As of right now, Luke Stem of Norristown is in 2nd place with a 151.95, and Danny Stauffenberg is in 7th place with a 175. So let's see how they do this round. Maybe Luke can pull ahead and get 1st place. Pat McPeed of Upper Moreland is in 1st place as of now. He's doing a 301C, reverse tuck 1.8, or degree of difficulty 1.6, sorry. A little sloppy on his entry, jumped pretty high though. That's definitely what he needed. So let's see what the scores are. 5, 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5. It's a pretty good start for Upper Moreland. Mike Cuffduggle. Certainly worthy of a scream, but then again, they scream for the 2.5 dives too, so they're inconsistent. Here's Danny Stauffenberg's 9th dive. Pretty good. Flopped those legs over a little tiny bit on his entry, but 4.5, 5.5, 4.5, 4, 5. So pretty good scores, pretty decent scores. Certainly going to keep him in 7th place. So not on the end of the board for that, or he probably would have gotten much more spring off of that. They're going to give him 6s, though. 6.5, 6, 7, 6, 6, 6.5. So pretty good. Not doing too bad. 52.21 back Summers half twist in the free position, a 1.7 degree of difficulty. A little bit of over rotation on his flip. Smacked his face pretty hard on the water. He's going to get 3s and 4s on that. 5, 4.5, 4, 4.5, 4.5. There's Upper Moreland's other diver. As I thought it should have been. Probably need to come in a little bit straight with 6s on there, but still 4.5s and 5s are going to boost him. Smacked a little bit on his entry, didn't come in too straight, so he's going to get a deduction off of that. 5 is way too high of a score for that. 3.5, 2.5, 3.5, 3.5, 5. Kind of ridiculous, but they'll throw it out anyway. Pretty good. Not bad. 4, 5, 4, 4, 4.5. Know what he is not watching diving. Here's Luke Stem of Norristown's 9th dive. He'll be doing a half twist. Five, 5.5 halves, 5.5. Here's Nick of Springfield's. So he did half twist as well. Pretty well done. One of his better dives tonight. 5, 5, 5, 4.5, 6. Here's Max of Plymouth Whitemarsh. So he wasn't on the end of the board for that one, and he twisted pretty floppily. I guess they're still going to give him 5s for their own personal reasons. Here's the 10th round of dives. It's pretty well done. Not gonna lie, it was a good dive, but they're gonna score him low because he didn't come in straight. So 6, 6, 5, 5, 5. Sounds like a bad telephone number. Danny Stauffenberg of Norristown's 10th dive. And there he is fixing the fulcrum. That will change the amount of bounce that he has on the board. Didn't really know if he knew what he was doing when he got out to the board. He's doing a back dive with a half twist. I'm going to score him 3.5, 5, 4, 4, 4.5 as he smiles over to his bench. So I don't really think he did know that that was his dive that he was supposed to do before he changed the fulcrum. Inward somersault, or reverse somersault. Didn't hear the dive, sorry. So double somersault, that's what they said, double somersault. Which he won't get high scores on. He'll get 3.5, 5, 4.5, 5, 5.5. Good, he made it all the way around. That's good. Yes, yes, yes. 4, 4, 5, 4, 4. So he was actually a former gymnast who converted over to diving last year. So that's why he's so good at the twisting dives, things like that. He's an Upper Morelands diver. Back double smacked very hard with his knees. Slow to come up out of the water. They maybe give him threes, I hope, fours. And they're going to give him twos because he smacked so hard. 2, 2, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. Bad luck, mate. Reverse somersault tuck, 1-6. Pretty high on his jump, tucked pretty tightly. He'll get 4s and 5s on that. 4 1/2, 4 1/2, 4 1/2, 5, 5 1/2. Pretty good scores. Fine dive. Scooped it a bit at the end there. And he'll get 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 4 1/2. Actually, that first score was 4, sorry. 51-32A. And here's Lucas Stem's 10th dive of Norristown. He will be doing a reverse double if I'm sure of it. Came out of it a little too early. If he held on a second later, he would have made it in. They're not going to get any points, but as I always tell them, don't psych yourself out. 2 1/2, 2 1/2, 3, 3, 3 1/2. So he's not happy with that. He actually did one in warm-ups that was a little better than that. He came in a little bit straighter, but on that one he came out a little too early. But it's not a failed dive, but he's going to have a hard time catching up to first place now. So that was a double pike. He smacked pretty good on the entry, so they'll take off some points for that. Not too many, though. 3 1/2, 3, 4 1/2, 4, 4 1/2. So not where he perfectly wanted to be. He wanted to come in a little bit straighter than that, but not too bad, so they won't take off too much. So it was a reverse somersault, done pretty well. In the tuck position, and a 6.5. That's too high of a score. 5, 4 1/2, 4 1/2, 6.5 thrown out. 5 1/2. All right, so we're now on our final round of diving. 12 more dives, and then you can all go to sleep. And it is 3:30 a.m. here. No, I'm just kidding. It's only about 8 o'clock. Upper Moreland's final dive. Back flip in the free position. Ooh, and he gets a 7. 8, 6, 5 1/2, 5, 7. So there's literally 3 points between that lowest and that highest score. That should never happen. There should be no more than 2 points, or the judges just should do a better job. Do a better job at looking at the dive, do a better job at scoring at the dive. That dive to me was a 6 dive, not a 5 dive, not an 8 dive. Back and a half. Looks like he scooped it a little too hard. It might have hurt his back, but pretty good job as well as the dive looks. I'll get an average score of about 5 on that one, so not too bad. Danny Stauffenberg for Norristown's last dive. Looks like they're going to score it. 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. So, not really where he wanted to be, but, I mean, he's not out of the competition. Twisted a little weird, twisted a little at the end, but, I mean, that's a hard dive to do, you know. And it's good, though, because Danny's still got another year here. Five and a half. 5, 5.5, 4.5, 6. So 6 is thrown out. Here's Doug from Springfield, the former gymnast we were talking about earlier. So let's see what he pulls out for his last dive. Reverse dive tuck. Not his best today, but coach looks happy, so they'll take it. 4 1/2, 5, 4 1/2, 4 1/2, 4 are the scores. Here's Upper Moreland's final diver. Very well done. 5, 5.5, 4, 6.5, 5. So scores a little bit sporadic all over the place, but not too bad. Don't go punching the wall over it. Let this commentator remind you there needs to be quiet on the ground for each diver to go. So he smacked a little tiny bit, not too bad, and he's going to get 4s on it. So pretty good way to end your night. 2, 3 1/2, 4, 4, 4.5. So good way to end the night. So now we have a back and a half with a half twist. So twisting extraordinaire up on the board. Pretty good. Over rotate a little bit, so he's going to get a lot off for that. 5, 4 1/2, 3 1/2, 4, 3 1/2. There's Chris from Upper Dublin moving the fulcrum so that he can get the maximum bounce for his body. Oh, and he just smacked on that. Got everybody on this side wet. So that is a failed dive. Unfortunately, Chris will not be with the rest of the people at the end of this. I'd be surprised to get anything but last. So bad luck, mate. Here's Luke's last dive. It's his twisting dive. Forward 1 1/2 with 1 1/2 twists. So hopefully he can get this one and nail it. Oh, scooped it a little bit on his entry. If he came out a little bit straighter, he would have gotten like 5s and 6s on that. 3 1/2. Inward front flip. Five, 4 1/2, 5, 5, 5.5. Here's Max from Plymouth Whitemarsh. He's doing a black back dive in the straight position. Jumped too far out. Didn't set as hard as you should have. You need to jump up in the air. Set hard. Back up over you. Go in the water. 4, 5, 5, 4.5, 5. And this concludes our Suburban 1 champs. We will be right back with some scores. Enjoy the elevator music while you wait.
I'm Gina Monastero here with this week's sports action. During the SOL American Conference Championship, senior Gwen Utz took third out of a total of 4 drivers with a score of 307. Also, Kim Detweiler took 9th and junior Kelly Cooney took 11th. In Boys American League Suburban 1 League Championship for diving, Pat McPeak of Upper Moreland took first place with a score of 354.3. Luke Stem of Norristown took second place with a score of 338.9. J.P. Zerilli took third place with a score of 320.3, and Danny Staffenberg took 10th place with a score of 269. And that concludes this week's diving match. Congratulations to all the members of the diving. Thanks for watching.